Okay, so we are going to talk about crafting a narratio for levels 1 through 3. So that just makes me want to say that creating a narratio is always the same. It doesn't matter what level you're in, whether you're writing a comparison essay or level 1, level 2, level 3, the way we come up with a narratio is always the same. The different levels add some refinements. Like in level 2, it teaches you how to check to make sure it has a couple of, you know, traits, some aspects that level 1 doesn't deal with. And then level 3 does that again. So, well, actually, level 2 adds a slant, and level 3 teaches you to check for plausibility and that kind of thing. Well, and also to make sure that it's clear and brief. But if we use this method to create the narratio or this way, it's not exactly a method. I mean, it's not like cookies. You can't guarantee it'll be perfect every time. But if we do it this way, we're going to check those boxes. It will be clear, it will be brief. All right, and it will be plausible. So let us begin. I don't know. I'm not very good at technology. Okay, let's do this. Here we go. So do you see my screen now? Can you see this worksheet that I have here? No, I quit sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, now I think you can see it. Okay, good. All right, this is not going to be a beautiful PowerPoint presentation kind of a day today because it's like they say in Texas, this is a working ranch. This is not a show ranch. We're going to get some things done. We're going to work, and so this is what it's going to look like work because we're going to work together. All right. Well, before we get started, though, here, let me just put this up to just pause for a minute while we think. How many of you have ever gotten a story that from a student that is long and descriptive? And I've gotten some of these that are 10 pages long about a beautiful princess and a wonderful castle and a handsome and kind prince. And have you seen stories like that? You have, Wendy? Ella, what about you?
Yes, definitely.
So Wendy, what are these stories like? How do you describe a story like that?
I'd say they're descriptive, as you mentioned. They're long. They may not have too many story elements. There may not be a conflict. There just may be sunshine.
Yeah.
Gets dull after a while.
Oh my goodness. It reminds me of I had a friend who said, I have trouble falling asleep, and so I listen to these stories and they talk a little bit slowly, but nothing ever really happens.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what this reminds me of. Ella?
Yeah,
Oh, you cut out, but what can you add to that? What were you about to say?
let's see. Can you hear me now?
Now I can. Yes. Now we can.
Okay. Um, just that nothing ever really happens. It describes all of the different circumstances, but there's not a lot of action or points to the story.
Interesting. Okay, so we have descriptions, but we don't have actions. We don't have things that happen. But so what I call these stories, but what is a story? Does anybody want to define that for us? Yay, we have more friends coming in. Anybody want to describe a story or what you think of when you think of a story? I never learned in school. Nobody ever taught me how to write a story, but we've studied a bit of it at Cersei. And when we did that, we used to actually publish a semester of story writing lessons. And what I learned from that is that the first thing you need to, I mean, it's not a perfect curriculum, which is why it's not a resource, and that's why we don't hand it out to anybody anymore. But I did learn from that. What that said is that the first thing we need to realize is we need to have a narrative sense. If a narrative or a narratio is a story, we need to have a sense of what a story is. And the way they defined it is that it's a causal chain of events. That there are different ways you could come up with a story, but at some point you're going to have a culmination of events, which means that one thing has led to another, and now we've got this high point. So does anybody want to add to that? That we have this?
I would say we've done IEW quite a bit, and Andrew Pudua certainly teaches the whole story sequence chart, but it's exactly as you're defining it. It is one thing that leads to another thing. So you have characters and setting that leads to maybe what the issue might be, or what is it that they want to the climax. And it's a gradual, it's a process.
Yeah.
That begins in one place and ends with the climax.
Yes, good. And it usually begins in a certain setting where everything is happy if you're going to have a terrible ending, or something's terrible at the beginning if you're going to have a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we have these series of causes that get us to the ending. Anybody, Ella, Mackenzie, Jennifer, anybody want to add to that? Well, I'll move on then. So what we have in the book, it suggests everything that we've just talked about, but it doesn't expose. What we like to do in Lost Tools is figure out a way to expose the inner logic of every bit of thinking that we need to do to write the thing that we need to write. So while the lesson in the book that indicates all these things, we've realized over the past 8 years that there are some more steps that we can add to connect the dots a little bit more, to make it easier for students to come up with this narratio. And the narratio, how would you when you think of the narratio, what are some different ways we could say what that is in an essay? How, Wendy, what's some couple words that come to mind for you?
Almost like setting, characters, again, who they are, what their issue is, what's the problem they're trying to solve.
Good.
What do the characters want?
Yes. So we have just so a narratio is a story. It's the same root word that narration comes from, that a narrator is. And so we have this story. And if you've been in Challenge A, how many of you have gotten to the part of Lost Tools Level 1 where you add this story to the essay? Have you done that before, Wendy? No. Okay, cool. We get to do it together. Oh, a chat. Yeah, you have, Jennifer. Okay, good. Yes, y'all are welcome to write in the chat or turn on your mic, since we don't have very many of us here. That's fine too. Okay, cool. Yes, challenge B goes to the end. Okay, good. Yeah, challenge A doesn't quite. You know, when I teach this, I switch these up because I love this lesson so much. I teach it before reputation. I just have more fun with it. So I switch those sometimes, which is fine. But anyway, okay. So what my students call this sometimes is the backstory, or it's the background story. Because if somebody runs in and says, he hit me, do something, then the first thing we say is what happened, because we need to know the story. We need to know what the background is. Did you walk behind his swing and that's why he hit you, because he didn't see you there and he was swinging when you went behind him? Or maybe it's a different story. Maybe the backstory is that you hit him first. Or maybe the backstory is that you stepped on his foot and so he hit you, but it was an accident that you stepped on his foot. It wasn't an accident that he hit you. So we need that background. We need to know that. And sometimes you've probably had students who feel that you can't just tell your reader or your audience, make a decision. We have to bring them up to speed. We have to say, here's the background of the story and of the issue. And so this is the decision. And so on we go. But so the point of an essay, when we write a persuasive essay, the point is the thesis. It's this issue, it's this decision that has to be made. And if you've gotten pretty far through level 1, about halfway even, you'll see that there's a division piece in the introduction that says, this is, let's talk about this. Here's what people agree on. But then there was a choice. There was a division. Some say that he should do it. Some say he should not have done it, because every Annie has that disagreement in it, right? You've got one side that he should have done it and the other side that he should not have done it. So there's the disagreement. We have these two options. And then we, in our invention, choose the side that we believe is true. And then we are telling our audience that this is the truth. This is the thesis. This is what should be done. But we need to get them up to that point. But that's the climax of the story, because it's the point of the essay, and that's what we need the background to the thesis. Or it could be just to the issue where this decision it needs to be made. And then we say, here's what I see. So it's the backstory. So we're going to see, how do you figure out what the backstory is? Because we don't want 10 pages of fields of daisies and sun shining in the sky. And I mean, maybe one of those things, her feeling of happiness, maybe one of those things caused an action. Because there can be a setting that causes things. Sometimes we write stories by saying, okay, there's a guy in a desert, and the desert's going to make him do these things. Or we could say there's someone just moved to a crowded city. And because the city is the city, it's going to cause some things. So it's possible that a location could be a cause. But anyway, we just want to find out these causes that lead us to the issue. All right, I talk too much. I just talked too much. So any comments or questions at this point? Okay, thanks. So what we need to find when we make a narratio is the background of the issue. So the issue is going to be the end of the story. And if a story is a causal chain of events, and we're looking for a chain, and we're going to end here, then we know the goal. So we're going to start with the goal. We're going to start with the end in mind and see what that chain is. So let's look at this one. We're going to start. I know I'm starting at the bottom of the page, but that's okay. We're going to start here. There's the actor, Little Red Riding Hood, and there's the issue. She had to decide whether to talk to the wolf. You've probably know that story, so I'm just going to keep going. And then there's a note here. We know these things happen, so we're going to write them in past tense. So she had to decide whether to talk to the wolf. Why? He spoke to her first. She had to decide whether to talk because he was talking to her. So do we answer when someone speaks to us? So that cause is easy to see. Why did he speak to her first? He spoke to her because she was alone in the woods. Well, why was she alone in the woods? Her mother had sent her into the woods with goodies to go to grandma's house. Why? Why did her mother send her? Because her grandmother was sick. Why? Well, not why was she sick? Sorry. So maybe this doesn't quite work. First I didn't put that there. See, there's a little bit of judgment here. So this is not why her grandmother was sick. So let's just take that out. Okay, Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother was sick. That is what kicked off this whole chain of events. So we're not going to answer any more of these whys. There's a list here. You probably noticed we went from Little Red Riding Hood, had to decide, and we've been going higher and higher up the page saying why, what caused that, what caused that, what caused that, why. And there's a bunch of whys on here in case we need them, but we don't need that many. So when you get to the end, as Alice in Wonderland said, stop. Or as she was told, when you get to the end, stop. All right, so we have our list of causes. Grandmother was sick. Mom sent Little Red Riding Hood, so Little Red Riding Hood was alone, so the wolf spoke to her, and she had to decide whether to speak to him. Boom, we have a chain of causes. So let's do the next step. Let's do part 2, or the end of part 2. We have a chain of causes. Now we need to know when the story begins, because so many stories begin once upon a time. They always tell us when it starts. One fine day, or it was a dark and stormy night, or after he woke from his dream, after he woke from his sleep, he discovered he'd been turned into a bug. Whatever it was. We always get a time at the beginning. So we're going to look at the top line. Her grandmother was sick. And we're going to state the time that happened. All right, so here we are. We're going to look at the time and say when it was. So we want a word that describes it. So we might say after Bottom had been turned into a donkey. We're reading Shakespeare and we have an issue there. Or this one, when a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. That's the story in Luke. It starts with the time that this thing happened, when a decree went out. Or we might write about another Narnia book and say that these events began during the reign of Caspian X. So we're going to say something like that. We start with some time. So in this one, for this one, I picked one day. And then it says add the rest of the phrase that describes the time of the first cause. And this is when I was thinking, I wrote nothing. Maybe I would add one day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother found out her mother was sick. Okay, so now we have the beginning, one day. Or maybe we could just put even after Little Red Riding Hood's mother found out that her mom was sick. All right. So now we go to part 2. We have a chain of causes. We have all the whys, all the causes, and then we can begin with a time now. So part 2, after your story parts are listed, check your work. We made this from bottom to top. Now we're going to check it from top to bottom. Just like when you subtract, you go from top to bottom, and then you check it from bottom to top. So let's turn it around and see what it looks like. Let's read it in the other direction. We're going to read from the top down this time. We made it from the bottom up. Now we'll read from the top down. One day, and we decided that's going to all be the time. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mom found out this thing. Her grandma was sick. Mom sent Little Red Riding Hood to take goodies. Little Red Riding Hood was alone in the woods. The wolf spoke to her. Little Red Riding Hood had to decide whether to talk to the wolf. He just wrote a story. It was already written, but now we've retold it in this very straight line of causes that tells us not the whole story of Little Red Riding Hood, but about just the background of her speaking to the wolf that was caused by her being alone, that was caused by her trip because her grandmother was sick. So any questions about what we did so far? We started at the bottom with the issue. Little Red Riding Hood had to decide whether to talk to the wolf. Why? He spoke to her. Why? Because she was alone. Why? Because her mom sent her, because her grandma was sick. And then we chose after mom found out her mother was sick. And then so from the top down, that's after Little Red Riding Hood, mother found out grandma was sick. She sent Little Red Riding Hood to take goodies. So Little Red Riding Hood ended up alone in the woods. So we can adjust our verbs. Ended up alone in the woods. The wolf spoke to her. A wolf appeared and spoke to her. Little Red Riding Hood had to decide whether to talk to the wolf. Any questions about that one? All right.
I have a question.
Okay, Wendy.
So in comparing this to what I see in both the student workbook and the teacher's book, what you're showing us here is beautiful because it has all the steps and it's got the parts and it's got all the whys and it seems very intuitive. But then if I'm gonna, present this to my class, what it's giving them in the text is a lot more general. Am I to create this that you're showing me? Do you have this for us to model? Or I guess that's my question.
Yes, I have a blank one I'll send you.
Fantastic. That's really what I wanted to hear.
Alrighty. Yes. Yeah, because this does fill a lot of gaps, fills in the gaps. And so, yeah, they're going to post it on the website, I think, but that's what we've been talking about, unless they decide to distribute it a different way. But it's just here for everybody to take. And so if you'll email me, excuse me, at the end of this, then I will send you a copy of it. And so I'll just write here, just since we're talking about it, I'll write my email address right here. Also, if anybody's watching the recording and you want to do the same, anybody can just email me, or you could tell all your friends, and 100 people can email me, and I'll send this to everybody. It's Camille@CerseiInstitute.org. I hope I spelled
Thank you.
that.
That's really helpful.
Yeah, and just tell me that well, I'll send you these notes if you want me to also for today, these examples, but just email me and say from the Narratio webinar, would you send me the examples? Would you send me the blank? And I'll send you
Thank
what
you.
you need. Yeah, you're welcome. Glad you asked that question. Okay, let's do it again. This is supposed to be the second one or the third one. I thought I filled out one, but maybe I decided just to do it really fast with you so you can see how I do it. This time, let's talk about Goldilocks. Goldilocks, the issue is whether Goldilocks had to decide whether to enter the bear's house. Or the house, sorry, we don't know, she didn't know whose it was. Goldilocks had to decide whether to enter the house. Why? I typed this out. Did I number it wrong? Here it is. I knew I typed this earlier. Goldilocks had to decide whether to enter the house. Why? She saw the door open. Why did she see the door open? Because she went on the porch, went up onto the porch. Why? Because she saw the little house. Why? Because she was walking in the woods. This reminds you of 3-year-olds, right? And they say, why? And you get all the way back to because God made it that way. So when you get back that far, you don't have to add that to the Narratio. But you will reach a point where things are irrelevant. And that happens no matter what line of causal chain you have. So we don't need to go back that far. Why was she born or something like that? We can stop with she was walking in the woods because we don't know what caused that. And that's back far enough. So, when did she walk in the woods? I think once upon a time is a good, or one day. One day. And there's nothing else we need to add right there. One day, Goldilocks, and it would say she on our list, so we probably need to add her name here. Goldilocks went for a walk in the woods. She saw an adorable little house, which could have caused her curiosity, but we don't want a big, long description. She saw an adorable little house. So she climbed the steps to the porch. And I'm copying from up here. I'm adding a couple, and instead of would, I put she went up. I put she climbed, so that's a little bit better verb, but still it's the same story. It's the same list of events that we have at the top. I know you can't see them both at the same time. So to check this, we could read the whole list of causes with so at the beginning of each line, just to check in our minds to make sure that we have causes. One day she went for a walk in the woods. So she saw a little house. So she climbed to the porch. So she saw the front door open. Standing open. So Goldilocks had to decide whether to enter the house. That's my last line there. So now we have a story. One day, Goldilocks went for a walk in the woods. She saw an adorable little house, so she climbed the steps to the front porch. When she saw the front door standing open, she had to decide whether to enter the house. So let's do this one more time. Well, sorry, before we do that, let's compare the first two that we already did. Wonder if I can show you side by side. What do you see in the first one that you also see in the second one? Where, that's part 3. Where did we start? We start with part 1, don't we? What did we start with, Wendy, in both times? What do we always have to know before we start?
That's a good question. We have to know what the actor of the issue is.
Good, thank you. Yeah, we have to, we always have to start with the issue. We have to know what our issue is. And we do by now. In fact, we know our thesis. We know that we've decided she should not have gone into the house. Or we decided that Little Red Riding Hood should not have talked to the wolf. So this comes in the lesson during arrangement after we have filled our Annie, after we've sorted the Annie, after we've looked at both sides and picked a side, and then we've pulled out the proofs that we like best, and we know our 3 main reasons and our conclusion. And now the last thing we do is write the introduction. So this is part of the introduction. So we know which side we've chosen. And we know what our reasons are by the time we reach this point. And so it says issue here. It could say thesis. It could say Goldilocks entered the house. She decided to enter the house. That's fine too. Why did she decide to enter? She saw the open door. Why? She was on the porch. Why? Well, I mean, we could read it going up with because. She had to decide because she saw the open door. Why? Because she went to the porch. Why? Because she saw the little house. Because she was walking in the woods. So how did, Wendy, I hate to pick on you the whole time, and I don't know if other people want to talk too. Ella, would you like to say, what is the question we keep asking over and over and over in order to find this causal chain of events? May not be fair for me to call on you. You may have had to go do something else, which is why we can't see you. Okay. You know, I once taught an online class several times. It was me. It was only me and one other girl. And we called it the April and Camille show. Because it's just the 2 of us. A lot of people, I think they posted the recordings, but anyway, it's just 2 of us. So Wendy, it's you and me today.
Oh, no, actually somebody answered on the chat.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't see it. But thank you, Mackenzie. We ask over and over and over. We ask why? Very good. It's just the one question helps us come up with the story. Good. And so, how long do we keep asking why? Kinsey, would you like to answer that too? Both times, when do we stop? You can turn on your mics if you want. Jennifer, did we lose you? You're there.
I'm here.
Would you like to say why? When do we stop? We ask why so many times, but how do we know when to stop?
Well, from what I can tell, it seems like it's the initial event that led directly to that particular action, not going back too far to say, oh yeah, when she was born, and then, finding your way down to the issue at hand.
Right, because if we get back to her grandmother was sick, then we would ask, why was she sick? Well, we don't know.
Or as far back as we know,
Yeah.
for that particular event.
Yes. But I think that you kind of feel it when it's time to stop.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Do all of you get that sense that you'll know when it's time to stop?
Our students may not.
They may not. They may not. They may say why the grandmother was sick, but we don't know. Or may say, why was she walking in the woods? I mean, it's possible they would say she didn't have anything else to do that day. But we don't know why. Maybe, you could go back a little farther, but you'd start to use your imagination. And it's fine to make some reasonable inferences. But we would really be telling an imaginative story at that point if we say she didn't have anything to do. Why? Because her mother never made her go to school. Why? Because her mother was negligent. Well, why was her mother negligent? So, we never, yeah.
So would
So
the,
would you,
it seems to
go
me
ahead.
like the actions would have to be, like the answers to these questions would have to be traceable in the story that you're reading, whichever one. You'd have to be able to show that this did in fact happen, and we can say why. But like if you go back further, such as her grandmother was sick, well, we don't know the answer to that question, so that's as far back as we can go. So
Right.
maybe with a larger book, which a lot of us tend to use when we're teaching this, it would maybe be more of like, what happened in this episode within the book that led to this decision? Because the kids will want to go back as far as they possibly can. One, just to be funny, because that's how they are sometimes. But that's what I'm gleaning from this.
Yes, and it's possible that there could be some, like, yes, but if you're on chapter 23 of Les Miserables, you don't want a retelling of the first 22 chapters.
Right.
So, but it's possible that there could be one thing from the beginning that would be mentioned, but it would come up in this causal chain. Yeah, we'll
Right.
try next. We'll do something more complicated. But just first, I wanted to practice the process on some things where we don't have to think much about the content. But you're right. So we don't know why grandmother got sick. That's not in the story. We don't know why Goldilocks went out the door that morning. It's not in the story. But yeah, and most of the time I think the kids, yeah, they might want to be silly and add to it. And it's kind of self-correcting, or they might just enjoy writing stories and write something really, really long. I had a really good student who did that one time, and I think she had a 3-page narratio. The rest of her essay was a page and a half. And I said, honey, this is too long. And that's all I said to her. And she resubmitted a perfectly brief and concise and complete narratio. Excellent.
Having done this essay, we only did it once. It was only one time. Other essays we did more than once.
Yeah.
It wasn't, I think somebody else said, it wasn't exactly clear in the materials, like how to go about it, but what you're doing right now sort of clarifies how far back they should go, because I think we did something that was almost like, if I remember correctly, almost like a concentric circle, like this happened, then this, then this, then this, in a big circle. And it was like we could have kept going, and it wasn't clear to any of us when to stop. And so I kind of had to just, okay, I think we've gone out far enough.
Yes.
But what I'm seeing here is this gives us sort of an organizational structure to sort of see, okay, we can stop here, because generally we can't, from the evidence in the story, tell what caused this event here. So now we'll stop here, and then I just like the way you're doing this, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Good. I'm glad it's helpful. Yeah. I mean, you don't, and you don't want to, if she's walking in the woods one day, well, it could be because it's sunny, because it's spring, because
Right.
the northern hemisphere, and this is what the equatorial, whatever. We don't need that. It didn't cause her to go into that house. So good.
Okay. Right.
And then Wendy, did you have another comment? Okay, so good. So we're starting with the issue, working backwards, asking why. And when we get to the end, we stop. And then what did we do next? Do you remember the next step on both of these? We need, the story needs to begin with some kind of setting, or the time that it happened. So we're going to pick a time, and it's usually related to something else in the story. So it's during this reign of the king, or it's when the decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed, or it's Midsummer Night's Dream. So this is an example of a very long and complicated story where there are these mismatch couples, one has forced to marry another, but she's in love with the other guy, and the king won't allow it. And so they run into the woods. And then also there's a group of actors in the woods, and they're rehearsing a play. And then there are the fairies who live there, and this is the fairy king. And then he has Oberon, and he has this assistant Puck who goes out and does all these things. And so this is a very complicated story. But if we're only asking whether Bottom should take this one action, Bottom the Weaver. So we might start with this, with just that after Bottom had been turned into a donkey, then, gosh, I can't remember the story. But it could be something like after Bottom had been turned into a donkey, then he wandered in the woods alone, and then this happened and that, and then he had to decide whether to go back to his friends in this condition, something like that, or to ask for help. So it could just be that piece of the story that we're focusing on, just that one actor, where he's an actor in two senses here, but just this one person in the story, this one thing that happened to him, started in the middle of the story. So it's the time that this thing happened in the middle of the story that he had these three things happen, and then he had to make a decision. So it just gets at that core, just that straight those causes of his one action. Because yeah, I do think the way the book indicates it, it says what all happened before the issue. And if Bottom has to decide whether to go to his friends for help, then we don't want to go all the way back to this girl who wants to marry someone that her father doesn't want her to marry. Because that, yes, they're both in A Midsummer Night's Dream, but that's not relevant to Bottom's decision. He knows there's going to be a wedding, and that's why he and the actors are out in the woods in the middle of this night, in the middle of the summer, and rehearsing their play. But the wedding is not what caused him to need to go. I mean, only very distantly and indirectly what would need him to go ask his friends this question. So does that help with an example a bit from, I know that wasn't very clear, but just in the Bible, the decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And so Joseph had to go to Bethlehem. And so if we're asking whether Joseph should have gone to Bethlehem, or should have gotten a donkey for Mary to ride on, it's not because Isaiah said something, or because God created the world in 6 days, like Genesis tells us, and that, Moses had these tablets, and then, we don't need to retell the whole Bible. We're just taking this piece. After a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed, then everybody's supposed to go to his own city. So Joseph wanted to go to Bethlehem, but he had to take Mary, and, and had to decide whether to get a donkey for her, or whether to get this particular donkey. So does that help with an issue within the middle of a book that's 800 pages? Okay, Jennifer, good. Good. I just recently finished reading The Once and Future King. And one time Merlin was teaching Arthur, and he turned him into a fish. So we can ask whether he should have hidden in the banks, in the reeds, when this bigger fish came by. But we don't need to go back to the fact, we might go back. He had to hide because he was turned into a fish because Merlin was teaching him. And so we might start with the time while Merlin was Arthur's instructor or mentor. But we don't need to say why Merlin showed up there, and why Merlin was living backwards in time, and why all of these other things. We just say, during the time that Merlin was Arthur's teacher, he turned Arthur into a fish, and Arthur was swimming in the pond, in the moat at the castle, and this thing happened, and Arthur had to make a decision. So it's just that, it's just right there while Merlin was mentoring Arthur. It's not the whole history of Camelot and everything that happened 50 years before he married Guinevere. Does that help with that piece of a book?
Yes, I have a question came up in my mind as you were talking. So I was trying to think of a story that I could backtrack like that. And then one of them was, for instance, I don't know if you've read it, The Picture of Dorian Gray. And the
Haven't.
issue came up of whether he should have had the portrait done. But then that got me thinking we could backtrack to the events that happened prior to that, but what about I guess our readers' omniscience of knowing the end? Do we factor that in, or is that not part of the narratio because that gets to events that happened after?
It's okay to include
For
things that
instance,
happen after because you know the whole story. So we're
Right.
not treating these as literature, but we're treating them as real people that we are practicing classical rhetoric with. We
Okay.
lift these characters out of literature. So,
Okay.
and that's why we're writing in past tense. It's not the literary present or the eternal present. We're just pretending that these were real people and that these are things that happened. So let's take Dorian Gray for an example. First, let me just do one last step on here. Just that once we got the time, we read it in order from top to bottom. That was the only thing we hadn't talked about yet. So just to summarize, we started with the issue or the thesis and we asked all the causes. We picked a time and read it from top to bottom. Are there any questions about that? Does everybody see that was the process, the whole process? All right, let's try it with Dorian Gray and see what happens. And I'm sorry, I haven't read it. This is, I've thought about reading it before and then somebody mentioned this book last week. So,
Oh, that's funny.
yeah. So Dorian had to decide, what was the issue you said?
Whether Dorian should have had he had his portrait painted. I haven't read it in a while. It's been a while. But it was what popped into my mind as I was trying to think of something. Dorian had a portrait painted, and then what ultimately happened is, as he was going about in society and rising up in the societal circles, the portrait started changing and turning ugly because his heart was turning ugly. And so it was haunting him. And then what he eventually, I don't want to do any spoilers, but
Okay.
it tormented him.
Okay.
And the portrait itself actually changed as he changed.
I had heard that part. Okay. So, but when he made this decision, it was very early on. So he had to decide whether to have his portrait painted. Why was he considering that? What happened? Was there famous?
He met someone else, and I can't remember the character's name, who was a very kind of flamboyant, vain guy in society. And I think it was like the thing to do. And there was like I don't know if it was a famous painter or just somebody that was painting portraits, and they convinced him to have it done. And so I guess his vanity got the best of him. And so he said, yeah, absolutely. And he wanted to look his best and all of this. It's been a few years since I read it, so I'm probably not remembering all the details.
Okay. This is a little bit rough anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah.
So how about this? If Dorian had to decide whether to have his portrait painter, why? Because he met somebody else who did it. Why did he meet that guy who did it? Because it was the thing to do. Everybody's doing it. Why? Then there was painter around. And then when, during not the reign of Caesar Augustus, during the heyday of French, whatever.
Of French, of Paris,
Yeah.
Parisian society or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's probably not a great description, but you see, but that's how we did.
Yes.
How we did
Okay.
it. We said he had to decide about the portrait because he knew somebody else who did it because everybody was doing it. Thing to do.
Okay, I see. So I think what I'm thinking of now is the next step of taking the issue and then doing the Annie and having that ending in mind, right?
Well, we are doing this in arrangement. So we have already completed.
I've already done that.
Yes. Because in arrangement, the first thing we do is sort the Annie and then pick the 3 groups from each side.
Okay.
pick 3 on both sides, and then we pick a side. And then we list our proofs, our thesis and proofs. And this is not really clear in the teacher's guide of level 1. I've been reading it this week.
Mhm.
When we list those thesis and proof, that's arrangement B. And that worksheet is in the student book, but there's not a copy of it in the teacher's guide.
Okay.
But it's our thinking order, and it means we go straight from the Annie to this list of what we're going to use in the body. And then it has the conclusion at the end. And so it forces us to write our introduction last. And I think, I think the reason a lot of people get writer's block is that they sit down with a blank piece of paper and they try to write an introduction to a thing they don't know yet.
Yeah.
So we don't do that. So in Invention, we've done all the topics pages. We think through all the topics worksheets. And those are places we go to get something to say. And then we put everything in the hopper and the Annie. And so we finished our invention. We've found all the information we can. And then we go to arrangement. We sort the Annie. We pick 3 on both sides. We pick a side or with the thesis. Pick a thesis, which is one side or the other. And then we list our proofs. And in arrangement B, so we list our proofs, and then the conclusion, and then the introduction. And when we reach that point, this would be an arrangement A lesson to write a narratio.
Yes. Okay.
And we're doing it kind of at the end of arrangement B, really, because that's where the introduction is. And then the last thing we do is write the outline, and then after that, then we go to elocution. So this will show up during arrangement when we're working on the introduction.
Arrangement A.
A is always the new thing. In this lesson, it's narratio. B is the thinking order. And then arrangement C is the template that gives you an outline.
Okay, thank you. I think I need clarification here. Okay, so you said arrangement A is always the new thing.
Yes.
Okay, so, but we're doing that after doing the old thing. So you're doing B first, then A? I guess that's my question.
For introduction pieces, that's ideal. I don't think that the book tells you to do that. And if you don't, it's probably not the end of the world.
Oh, no, but what I'm saying is, I guess, because I need things repeated quite a bit. And this was only my first go around with Lost Tools as a tutor. I did it once before as a parent, and I don't feel like, I think this is the 3rd time in, and I'm going to finally start getting some aha moments. But with this particular part, what's that?
I did it for 7 years before I quit saying,
yeah,
I get it.
Yes, no, I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to all my yay. Oh, I get that now. But the thinking order has always been sort of this nebulous to me. I never quite understand where it goes or why we don't call the entire thing a thinking order in this arrangement piece. But so if I'm understanding you correctly, when we are in this arrangement and we have a new tool to use, we begin with the things we already know, we've already done. So the sorting, the picking, the thesis, listing of our proofs. And then we work into our new tool, which would be in this case, the narratio, and then go back to, again, what we know in our order to the outline. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think so. I may have gotten a little lost, but yeah.
Sorry.
There's really probably a couple of ways you could do it, and whatever.
They don't call them lost tools for nothing, I guess.
Now we got lost people.
Yeah.
All right, lost and found, I hope.
I hope.
But the thinking order is the preparation for the essay, and the outline is a preparation for the essay, but we can't start with the outline because the introduction goes at the top of it. The thinking order is the order in which we can think of everything that goes into the essay. So first we think with the Annie, and that gives us the body, that gives us our proofs. And so we start with the proofs and arrangement B, and then we say, okay, then how can I conclude this? Well, I need to restate the thesis and the main reasons, and I need to add an amplification. And then we say, okay, now that I know all this stuff is going to be in my essay, I can write an introduction for it. So now, what's the background story? What kind of exordium can I use? And because you can't think of that stuff until you have your everything else figured out. And then so we call that thinking order because it gives us all the outline pieces, but it's not in the right, but it's not a presentation order. The outline gives you a presentation order because that's when your introduction goes first. But you know you can't sit down with a blank piece of paper and write an introduction to something you don't know what it is yet. So that's why that is the presentation order. We have to present it like that, but we can't think it up that way. Development order, sometimes the thinking order is called. So the first thing that we come up with is our proofs. And then from there, we figure out how to add, what we need at the end, what we need at the beginning. Well, and then also, by the very end, you'll the proofs and the ante process, that also gives you your refutation section. And then the last thing we can create is the introduction, which will include the backstory or the narratio. So is that clearer now? I'm glad, Jennifer, that it's getting better. I know. Well, none of us were taught this way. We weren't taught to think this way. We weren't taught to write this way. And I mean, thank God we have it now. I mean, thank God I got it when I was 40, because, which was a long time ago. But it just, finally we're learning this, but there's just a whole lot to it. And like somebody said, there are 100 things happening at once when you write an essay. And yeah, this just has a lot of parts and a lot to learn. I mean, what the terms are, what they are, and not just where they go, but how do you make it? Like, if you need a background story, well, how do you make it? How do you think it up? And so there's a lot in this book. And the end of level 1 has the outline for a doctoral thesis. It is a complete persuasive outline. You're going to write 10 pages for each thing and not a paragraph, but the outline is there. All the parts are there. I was talking to a friend who when I was talking to her, just had recently finished her PhD in vocal performance. And we talked about her dissertation, and she had all these parts in all this order. So there's a lot to it. So don't feel bad if you don't get it in the first 9 months.
Well, these webinars help.
Good, Jennifer.
I also did summer intensive before I directed, and the light bulb just went off just by going through the first couple. Because as a parent, I didn't understand how to use all of the invention worksheets and all that stuff. And we eventually just didn't. And we just jumped to the Annie chart and kind of were winging it for a while. But now it makes sense. And now this piece makes even more sense, as because that was probably the one piece that was keeping me from going all the way through 7 this coming fall, because I'm going to be teaching it again in a different co-op, because I didn't fully understand it. And if I don't understand it, I'm not going to teach it.
I do the same thing. Right. I mean, well, how can we do anything else? Yeah. And, I'm glad you said that. We also do workshops. If you want somebody to come and to your town and teach all your people. I've done a lot of workshops where a director will get all the moms and all the tutors and everybody, and we spend about 6 hours together, and we work through the first 6 weeks of lessons. Plus we do this one usually, and then a couple of others that we have some tricks and tips for that are not in the book. You're starting to get those in the webinars now, and this will be posted on YouTube later, but you don't get it all in one day in person, if you just watch a webinar here and there. But those have been really helpful to people. It's really great when communities do that, because everybody's so well equipped and so much more at peace. And I mean, I had one lady at the end of the day, I don't know if she was a CC mom or not, but she said, okay, now I can watch the videos. I was scared to watch the videos, but now I can.
Actually, as an aside, we've done that. We have an amazing apprentice of you guys in our community, and she has done for the last few years intensives for us, and they're really, really helpful. And I agree that once she was able to, you know, bring us into the fold and help us do the process, that the videos did make more sense
Yes, yes,
when you just needed a refresher. So
yeah,
I just want to plug the value of having those intensives by you guys, because they're very good.
good. I'm really glad. Yeah, and you can go through them again and again. And who's your apprentice? I'm just
Oh,
curious.
Joy Ward.
I know Joy. I love her. Okay, good. I'm glad you have
Me
her.
too.
She's a blast. I mean, she knows her stuff. So
Mhm.
that's really good. And she knows that you don't just pick up a book and do it. It's like swimming. You don't just read a book and then go do it. You need
Yep.
we need coaching. Writing is a skill and we're coaching it. So we need each other and we need conversation. Okay. We need to talk about the apprenticeship program. Okay, well, just for Narratio, we did a couple and we've compared them to each other. And then we did one that was a little bit more complicated because it was the middle of a story of a longer book. Did anybody, we just have a couple more minutes, but I do want to talk about the apprenticeship program. I was in it for 18 years and I highly recommend it.
Oh.
Yeah, I joined on, I refused to leave. I worked in it for a long time. So it's a wonderful, wonderful place, and group of people to learn with. But any comments, I mean, questions about Narratio before we finish this? We did two and compared them, and now we've done one together. Is everybody getting the idea of how to come up with this list of causes? You know, we've said, and this doesn't always get clear, hasn't always been clear in the books, but we teach a persuasive essay as the foundation of writing and rhetoric because it contains the seeds of every kind of writing. You've probably noticed that it contains the seeds of speech because what you're doing is writing a speech. All you have to do is deliver it, memory, delivery. Debate, because you're looking at both sides of an issue. Poetry, because we have all the schemes and tropes. And story writing, because of this Narratio lesson. So this is a little bit of story writing. And if we have these steps down, you could start with your own issue and invent a list of causes for it. And you've got a short story. So, and I always spell arrangement wrong. E. All right. So any more comments or questions about Narratio? I hope this is helpful. I hope we didn't jump around too much. I'm happy to send you notes. I'll send you the blank document. So anybody watching can email me, Camille@cerseiinstitute.org, and I will send you whatever you ask me for. And I think I'll just put all these into one document if you want notes. The apprenticeship program then is a 3-year teacher training program. Oh, good. Yeah, you're welcome, Mackenzie. I want everybody to have these. I want Lost Tools to be easy for you, as easy as possible, for people to understand and teach it to our students. I heard somebody say that, and I can say the same, but I can't take credit for the quote, that I've seen non-writers turn into writers. I have seen non-thinkers turn into thinkers. And I just believe that is the glory of rhetoric. And if I want this in the hands of every child in America, for starters, America and beyond. So I am happy to help and provide any resources that we can, answer any questions. You have my email address. If you email me, I'll send you a list of free resources, the links to the YouTube channels, to the free Q&A every month in a couple of days. It's on Thursday. I think today's not Wednesday, but I'm not sure. But we have a free Q&A the third Thursday at 3 of every month, the third Thursday, 3 Eastern time. So that's noon Pacific. We have a couple of forums. We have all kinds of stuff. And we do have this apprenticeship program. It's a 3-year program. We meet twice in person. Good. We have a five days retreat in person in about the first week of August, sometimes the end of July. And then we have twice a month meetings online, and then another 3.5-day retreat in February. And There's reading over the 3-year period to read the 3 epics, Iliad, Odyssey, Aeneid. And then every spring is always a Socratic dialogue and a Shakespeare play, Hamlet, The Tempest, and Julius Caesar. And it's just a wonderful time. And then the retreats include some practice teaching. So you learn the lost tools, you get to teach in front of the other people who are there, which sounds completely frightening, but it's not at all. Because everybody tells you what you did well, and then you get one thing to work on for next time. And really having that coaching really can change your teaching. We talk about mimetic teaching a lot and Socratic teaching some too. So highly recommend it. We have groups all over the country. We have a Rocky Mountain group, a Mid-Atlantic group, a Texas group, a couple of groups in North Carolina area, because that's where our main office is. We have, yeah, 2 of our head mentors are based in our Cersei office in the Charlotte area. And I probably forgot something, but we also have a Latin apprenticeship that's a 3-year teacher training in Latin, or 3-year language training. Okay, anything else? We're 4 minutes over. I'm going to let you go, but I'm happy to answer any more questions if anything else has come up.
No, but thank you again. Appreciate your time. This was great.
Thanks, Wendy. Thank you for being here and for asking questions and answering questions and being here live with me, because I thought at one point I was going to have to do this all by myself. I was about to call Patty and say, you want a monologue or do we just skip it? I don't think that's boring.
Glad we could do it like this. Take care.
Good. Thank you so much. You too.
Bye, thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Bye. Thanks. Bye, Wendy, Jennifer, Mackenzie.